Hi there, I'm Christine Lee with Torrance Citi Cable, and today I'm giving you a virtual tour of the Torrance Art Museum's Gallery 1. Joining me is curator Josh Hashemzadeh. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So we're in a very unique situation because there is an exhibit in here that no one really can appreciate in person right now, right Josh?
That is true, yeah. Unfortunately, we're keeping our fingers crossed for the end of August, but right now this is the most in-depth look I think that we can have.
So we thought we could bring the exhibit to you, and Josh and I are keeping our 6 feet distance, but you're going to show me around to each of these pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go through and hopefully learn some more about the exhibition.
All right, let's get started. Right behind us is the first one that you want to show us, right?
Yeah, so Roy Thurston, so this is an artist that was coming to prominence in like the late 70s and going through the 90s, and so he's using actually like metal works that he fabricates in his studio, and this piece specifically is using silicone that's going over that, and the way that silicone is reflecting light really plays to how the light of this piece is displayed throughout the day. So Anna Sue Hoy, she's another LA artist, but she's looking at materials here. Again, you can see like the concrete and the ceramic cast. It plays to a long history of ceramics within Los Angeles, but these minimalist forms are also in reference to East Coast-based sculptor Richard Serra, who had done a list, like an essay that listed a bunch of verbs that talked about like how one approaches art making. And so for her, she's taking that and kind of thinking about, the actions behind sculpture, right? So this like engagement of producing work as almost like a lifestyle engagement that informs the work and allows us to see these things in more dynamic ways.
And when I was looking at this over here, I was starting to get a little hungry because, am I right? Is this frozen yogurt?
So it is based on frozen yogurt. The piece is actually done in marble. And so this piece by Alex Israel is called The Big Chill, which takes its name from a very prominent frozen yogurt establishment in LA, The Big Chill. And then it also plays to the movie, the 80s movie as well, The Big Chill. And so it's kind of this play on history within LA and also this idea of fiction kind of permeating the ways we live our lives.
And then you're going from colors to like white again. What's this?
So Lauren Halsey, she's working with, again, really sort of basic industrial materials in order to tell like local stories that maybe otherwise wouldn't exist in like, the concept of a museum or an institutional history. So working in South Central Los Angeles, she's taking these, almost like hieroglyphic-esque substrates, right, and like carving into them in the same way that pictographs or things like that have conveyed stories for thousands of years. So this is an artist that really is a master of illusion. So like all of these works, they look absolutely real, but when you start to look at them, you can kind of see on the back of that piece there, they are just canvases, and they're basic materials that are meant to emulate these kind of industrial substrates. And so for him, like thinking about the relationship between Japan and America, having grown up and exposed to like Vietnam War, he's really thinking about like the way illusions kind of exist within a cityscape, and also like the idea of building something, I think in LA, that's so rooted in this kind of like development and sensationalism, that there's always this kind of like element of illusion to that as well, right? There's always like hopefulness of what something could be and the reality of what it actually is. And so I think like finding him kind of in the middle of those two things in a way that feels almost like still life or representative, but then also kind of like formal and abstract, I think is an interesting play.
And over here, am I seeing a bunch of ropes?
They are. So Claudia Parducci, she's working with bronze cast to create these ropes, and so she's also very invested in this kind of thinking of architecture, but sort of with like a feminist approach. So rethinking the way that a lot of these kind of archetypes of environment have been created predominantly from maybe like a male perspective, and kind of turning them on their head. So I always like looking at this piece almost like trophies, like an old log cabin has those hunting trophies, kind of up on the wall. Here she's posing the same thing, but in a way that's maybe alluding to a more malleable sense of what those things could be, and how like interpretation on that can kind of remove its meaning or kind of play with that meaning. So Math Bass is an LA-based sculptor and painter, but I always like this piece because the bright colors, for one, and the shape of this sculpture in itself kind of refers back to maybe some of the like local things that you would see. So maybe like when you see a storefront close, right? They pull that gate in front.
I was gonna say it looks like the bars that you have outside windows or outside doors.
Exactly. So it's like it plays a little bit to that, but it also becomes this really kind of elegant and isolated form as well. And so kind of playing to how maybe someone interprets that imagery as something both maybe like banal, but then also beautiful, I think is an interesting contrast within this piece, and something that also kind of plays to that mid-century aesthetic that we talked about with Anna Sue Hoy and some of the other artists in the exhibition. So this is
that
kind
one
of
looks
like
totally different.
Polar opposite, right? So it's like still very simplistic forms, but here kind of playing to a history of sculpture, like self-leaning. So it's kind of a sculpture that's working for itself, and I always like the fact that too the silhouette of this kind of is reminiscent of overalls. So kind of like thinking about labor and the idea of the history of sculpture as a sort of masculine endeavor, and then thinking about how that can maybe be, examined and deassembled and stuff. So thinking about this as a sculpture in relationship to that, you see how different these things are, but really like reducing things to their most iconic representation, right? How you can derive meaning from form in a very sort of basic and visceral way. So this is actually an interactive piece by Juan Capistrán. And so you have the image of a person laying on the ground, which in today's climate is a very charged symbol, but he's left it pretty ambiguous, right? You don't know if that person's doing well, if they've just passed out, if they're just taking a moment to lay down. But I think it's really playing to like our familiarity of these images and like the meanings that we throw onto something. And so if you flip them over, there is a quote that says, "Empire does not confront us like subject facing us, but that of an environment that is hostile to us." So thinking of really like how we're affected by the sort of systemic totality of everything around us, and how we derive meaning from that, and whether it's inflicted on ourselves or others, it's something that's really sort of prominent now, and I think has been for a long time. And so he really plays to that as a local LA resident, bringing that history. So Helen Pashkin is a very prominent LA artist that really rose to acclaim in the 1960s. So she's sort of a champion of the light and space movement, along with many others that you may know, Mary Corse, James Turrell, Robert Irwin. And so she's really playing with like translucent materials, and she's one of the early people to do this, and also really kind of set a paramount for female minimalists within Los Angeles. And so all of her pieces, there's kind of like this hidden element to it. And as you said, as you move around that piece, it kind of reveals things, and the more time you spend with it, or the more light is refracted through the objects, you start to find things kind of hidden within, and it creates this kind of abstract experience that is really dynamic to the way light plays with an object. And I think in California, there's no place better to play with natural light than here. So Aaron Sandness, he is a younger painter as well. He's based here, working with this piece with car enamel and paint. So this is actually based on the manufactured paint of a Pontiac. So thinking again of this kind of like local, almost like hot rod culture and this kind of Americana presence. And then you'll get these 4 triangles on each one of these X paintings that create that dynamic sort of glossy X in the middle. And so those shapes, although they look just kind of geometric, and they are, they kind of reference, or they're meant to reference, the folding of the American flag at ceremonies. And so he had lost a friend in the Iraq War, and so this is kind of paying tribute to that in a way that says, like, we pay respect to that, but there's also this fascination of like this Americana will to like just kind of keep going forward, kind of like pedal to the metal kind of thing, like within hot rod culture, that is both enticing but also detrimental. And I think navigating why we lie somewhere in the middle of that is something that's interesting to him, and something that these paintings continue to contemplate.
Then we go from a bold color to a more kind of
yeah,
muted.
So Lynn Aldrich, she's working in LA for some time as well. Also really invested in readily available materials. So you'll recognize that all of these are rain gutters, that you see on any suburban home. But they're painted and dissected and cut and fabricated in ways that create a really kind of organic shape. And this amalgamation of these materials, although kind of simple in their construction, one, start to develop a real complexity, and I think two, they kind of become a metaphor for LA's housing development too in some ways, right? It's like this kind of organized and uniform development that kind of becomes chaotic in some ways, and in some ways kind of beautiful, but otherwise problematic. And so I think playing with that, these objects, which again are really simple, can start to have real meaning and tell stories about a place that's unique and different from the way people may have approached sculpture on the East Coast and stuff at that time. So really kind of playing to a local environment here.
So these are rain gutters.
They are rain gutters, yeah. It's you can make art with simple materials and generate I think great meaning out of that. So this is a piece by Sam Durant. So these are all taken off of like historical photos and documentations of protest posters. So taking something that's really existing in the streets and engaged in a sort of civil rights discourse. He's presenting them as these larger than life light boxes that are reminiscent of the billboards and neon signs that you find on any boulevard or avenue here in LA. But really thinking about how these ideas of protest, these messages of civil rights can kind of be reinterpreted over time, and how there's a kind of fluidity to the messages, and then also the presence that they have, and even the word you're on Indian land, like now today, is maybe looked at differently than it was then, and so the way that language changes, I think he's advocating that civil rights kind of needs to make that kind of progression as well, and that these things are always adapting. It's not a static environment. So Laddie Dill, this is a piece from the late 60s, and he's worked with neon early on to create almost like these sentences out of light, and for him, like creating this meaning either vertically or horizontally out of these materials that again relate to that light and space movement, were really like pivotal to his practice, and again helped shape the LA art scene in a way that was reflective of that environment. So all those neon signs that you see when you're looking for takeout and stuff, you're so exposed to them that they become synonymous in the way we think about how do you depict a city like Los Angeles or a city in general. And I think Laddie Dill using that as a fine art object or material was really an interesting approach at that time, and still is relevant today.
Well, thank you so much, Josh, for showing me
Yeah,
around.
thank you.
And thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hi, I'm Christine with Torrance Citi Cable, and we are out here at First Hair Studio. I actually got a haircut here just days before services moved outdoors. Today we are getting a haircut, my first haircut since the COVID quarantine. Here we are. There's a check-in table over there, and then we're going straight in. 아줌마 안녕하세요. 오랜만이에요. 아줌마 이거 다 쓰니까 이상하다. 2 years ago, I introduced you to my hairstylist, Jinhee Kim. She reopened her small business on June 1st after 2.5 months of being shut down due to COVID-19.
집에서 집안도 치우고 일 맨날 하면 정리 못했던 거 정리하고 또 손주들 베이비시팅도 한 3일 하고 바쁘게 있었어요.
Now that she's back, Jinhee says her new reality looks a lot different.
크리닝 같은 거 썼던 것도 썼을까봐 그거 많이 신경 쓰는 것 같아요. 6피트를 유지하려고 그러고 하나 해서 저쪽에 좀 멀리 떨어져 앉혀놓고 만약에 밀리면은 차에 갔다 오라 그러고.
하루 종일 이렇게 마스크 쓰고 일하는데 많이 불편하시죠?
불편한데 뭐 나만 불편한 거 아니니까 괜찮아요. 할만해요.
While I'm here for a haircut and a root touch-up, another customer is finishing up her perm. Isa says doing her hair is her form of self-care.
I think it gives you something to be excited about. I don't know, just to be happy about, just because everything's really gloomy right now.
How does it look?
I really like it. I've had bad experiences before where like it didn't turn out how I wanted it to, but this is actually how I wanted it, so I love it.
She's preparing to return home to Washington, D.C. after staying out here for a while.
I'm excited to go back. Sometimes when you haven't seen your friends for a long time, like you're kind of nervous. You don't know if you gained weight or if you look different. So yeah, I'm excited now.
Bye! Jinhee cleans her space thoroughly after each customer, and I've never seen this place so empty. 요새 비즈니스가 코비드 전 비즈니스보다 어떻게 비교가 돼요?
비교가 되는 거는 옛날에는 손님을 밀리면서 약속을 물론 해고해도 하나 발라놓고 하나 기다리게 해놓고 또 중간중간에 해고 그러는데 요즘은 될 수 있으면 그렇게 안 하려고 그러죠. 전화하면 물어봐요. 너네들 손님을 한꺼번에 많이 받지 않냐, 많이 안 받는다고 한꺼번에 받을까봐 물어보는 사람들이 거의 물어보더라고요.
This waiting area used to be filled with things to read, but now they're all gone.
매거진 치우고 뭐라도 다 치우고 커피도 다 치우고 노커피 No water.
Regardless of any discomforts, Jinhee says she's thankful to be able to work during this time.
열 수 있는 게 좋아요. 그것도 좀 걱정은 되는데 그래도 열으니까 집에만 있으니까 너무 답답하고 손님들도 해달라는 사람은 많고 연락도 오고 그러는데 못했죠.
She's grateful for every customer that comes in and hopes they continue to take good care of themselves.
다들 건강하시고 조심하시라는 거 좀 너무 걱정스럽잖아요. 너무 많이 생기니까.
감사합니다. In Torrance, I'm Christine Lee, Kimbap TV. Since moving her services outside, Jinhee says she has seen a dip in business, and because she's the only person who's able to work, she's trying to line up as many customers as she can, one after the other. In Torrance, I'm Christine Lee for Torrance Citi Cable. Hi, I'm Christine with Torrance Citi Cable, and today I want to introduce you to a restaurant in downtown called Miyabi Uni. My husband and I biked here a few weeks ago, and we noticed that they were selling some unusual things, and so I just wanted to check in and see how they've been doing during this pandemic. Do you like shave ice?
Yeah,
What do you like the best about it?
I like the best about it because I like ice.
6-year-old Juliana and her family cool off with $3 shave ice in a place that's typically known for much pricier food options.
Uni means seaweed in Japanese. That's our main ingredients for many of our dishes here. We use it for pasta, sashimi, sushi, anything I can imagine. We even make ice cream with a sea urchin.
SHINTARO YANO has managed Miyabi Uni since it opened in 2017.
I think we're like a very unique restaurant. We have diners visiting us from New York, China, Korea, Japan. I remember some guests was driving from Las Vegas too. So it's a niche restaurant, so people were taking time to travel all the way up to here.
But he says everything changed the moment COVID-19 started making headlines.
I remember like March 2nd, all of a sudden the sales dropped a lot. And then since the lockdown, we pretty much lost the business. Right now, we only have probably about 20% of the sales from previous year from the same time.
Tables that were once filled with customers now sit empty, and colleagues who worked alongside SHINTARO and his chef are gone.
It's hard, yeah. It's sad. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of them. My coworkers, yeah. It's sad that I'm still remember the moment I had to inform them, oh, we gotta let them go.
Have you ever had to do that before?
Not like this, yeah. Not like this.
SHINTARO also lived and worked in both Japan and Hawaii. He says current circumstances remind him of other difficult chapters of his life.
When I was living in Hawaii, we had the SARS and we have the Iraqi war. So in that time, since Hawaii is like a tourist-based island, we lost all the tourists. Waikiki was nearly empty.
He says when situations seemed hopeless, his neighbors stepped in.
The reason why a lot of business survived at that moment, that hard moment, because like a lot of local guests were supporting us. Even though we were in Waikiki, it's like Waikiki is not the spot for local people, but we still remember a lot of like local people were trying to support us as much as they could. So this is more difficult situation, but I think I had the idea how to survive.
That priceless experience taught SHINTARO about the importance of loving his neighbors, especially the elderly ones who live in this condo complex that's attached to Miyabi Uni.
They were asking us if we have some eggs to spare for them. That's why we ended up just carrying the stuff that we have hard time buying at the grocery stores. I knew our suppliers were still having the chicken or the eggs, so we were just selling at pretty much at the cost.
SHINTARO's idea to offer more affordable menu items also came with his desire to give back.
Every single guest has to be treated equal. Doesn't matter how much they spend. It's important for your business. So I know like a lot of places are charging like $6, $7 for shave ice, but come on, it's just shave ice. So something that we can offer to our neighbor under this hard situation. That was the purpose for starting to do that. I have two boys too, 11 years old and 8 years old son. And if there is something like, for example, like shave ice and my neighbor, I will buy it.
In return, local customers are starting to show up.
We're all going through a crisis right now, and so it's important, I came in here to buy some shaved ice for my kids.
Some guests are taken out 3 times a week. So luckily we are supported for like nice neighbors. I think that's our mission. Let's stay open for the people who wants to support us. So that's like something motivating us to keep open, I guess.
He hopes more people will consider trying their sea urchin dishes or even a bowl of shave ice the next time they're passing by.
Just don't forget about us. if they don't forget about us, like, yeah, I'm just hoping, like, we can reopen back to normal. We're hiring all our staff. So, yeah, it's just, I know it's just a matter of time. Like, it's just a matter of time.
Since filming that video, the city launched a pilot program called Downtown Does Dining Al Fresco, and Shintaro says thanks to that program, business has been picking up. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you again in our next video. Hi there, I'm Christine with Torrance Citi Cable, and today we are hanging out at Sea Air Golf Course.
How can you beat this? You're right in the middle of Torrance. It's a beautiful ocean breeze. You can play 9 holes in maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, and get an introduction to golf. And it's cheap.
Kurt Michael and his son Tyler have been playing here for years.
I like the first shot, but sometimes you don't hit it right.
What do you mean?
When I was playing hole 4, I hit it bad and I hit it past the trees all the way on to hole 5.
The pitch and putt course sits on 6 acres of land, with the longest hole being just 84 yards.
It's kind of cool. Sometimes you have 3 generations in one family playing, which you can't really do on a big course, because you can have a small child play with his dad and grandpa.
Larry Johnson says he's worked here for 42 years, but this is the first time he's having to implement certain changes to keep visitors safe during COVID-19.
Since the county let us reopen, we've had to go with their procedures. When they get to the counter, they need to fill out a waiver, which is required, and in that waiver is also to have everybody's names of the people that played that day, so we can do COVID tracing if needed. The players have to stick to only a foursome, no fivesomes allowed. The putting green is closed. They're not allowed to touch the flag sticks, and so we have little foam at the bottom of the cup, so each player picks the ball up themselves out of there. We do rent clubs up here, so after they're done using those, we spray those down.
Despite the new rules and regulations, Johnson says a record number of golfers, including many new ones, are showing up.
It's been super busy up here all summer. A lot of the kids can't do their soccer camps and baseball camps, so it's either the beach or Sierra, it seems like.
The Women's League and the Seniors League are both on hiatus during this pandemic, but Seniors League member Gary Matsky invites me to a friendly competition.
I try to come here at least several times a week because I'm not out playing big courses, because my regular partners for the big courses are sort of staying inside with their wife and not going anyplace, so this is all I got.
Gary says he's grateful to still have this option to play outside and isn't worried about the coronavirus while he's here.
A little mask and a lot of fresh air and sun, and I think that's more important to me.
Meanwhile, the Michaels say despite some discomfort, they are learning to adjust to golfing under the new circumstances.
I hate wearing masks. To tell you the truth, it doesn't bother him, but I hate wearing it, especially since I have a beard. That doesn't help. But it is what it is, We all got to do our part, right?
This one isn't itchy, and I like it when it's not itchy, but sometimes when you just start wearing it, you start to focus on the golf game and not really that it's itchy.
The Sea Air Golf Course is open 7 days a week and only closed on Christmas Day. I'm Christine Lee for Torrance Citi Cable.